In the darkness of a cold alien prison, a faint humming sound echoed through the walls. The air was heavy with the smell of metal and strange chemicals. Ethan Cole opened his eyes slowly, his vision blurry as dim green lights flickered overhead. His wrists and ankles were bound by glowing restraints that pulsed like they were alive. He could hear muffled voices outside the cell, harsh and guttural in a language he barely understood, but the tone was clear. They were discussing him. They were discussing the human prisoner. One of the voices, deep and commanding, spoke louder than the rest. The words translated in his earpiece. Barely working, said he carries the coordinates we need. We will take it from his mind. Ethan sat, still. His face, calm, but his eyes sharp, scanning the room. The walls were alive with strange markings, symbols that moved like they were breathing. The temperature dropped slightly as heavy footsteps approached. The cell door opened, and a towering alien stepped. In its body covered in black and silver armor, its eyes glowing like molten gold. The alien was General Vrylock, known across the galaxy for breaking even the strongest captives without mercy. He stepped closer, looking down at Ethan as if examining a piece of fragile glass. You are far from home. Human. His voice was deep and cold. We can do this. The easy way or the hard way? Ethan tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk forming on his lips. I'm guessing you prefer the hard way, the general's. Expression didn't change. He signaled to two soldiers with armor that shimmered like liquid. They unhooked Ethan from the wall, his legs weak at first, but his posture strong. He did not fight them. Instead, he studied every detail of the hallway. They dragged him through every camera, every guard, every doorway they passed. The corridors were lined with alien technology machines that floated in the air, casting faint blue light over the steel floor. There were whispers as they walked some. Soldiers sneered. Some looked away as if they already knew what was about to happen. They reached a large circular chamber, the walls covered in screens and strange devices. A chair sat in the center with clamps for arms and legs, wires hanging from the ceiling like a nest of serpents. The soldiers forced Ethan into the chair. Cold metal locking around his limbs, a hooded alien scientist approached its hands, long and skeletal, carrying a device that hummed with strange energy. We will read your mind, the scientist hissed. You will not resist, because there is no resisting. Ethan looked up, his eyes reflecting the alien's own glow. You might want to be careful with that. The machine powered on lights, flashing symbols, scrolling across the walls. The scientist began the process. A beam of light shot into Ethan's head, a cold wave washing over his mind, pulling at his memories, images of Earth, of war, of a black sphere hidden in the depths of space, flashed rapidly. But then something else appeared, not from Ethan's mind, but from somewhere deeper. A shadow moving behind the images like a predator in the dark. The lights flickered, the screens distorted. The beam began to pulse uncontrollably. The scientist stepped back in alarm. General Vrylock barked at the crew to hold the system steady. The restraints on Ethan's wrists began to hum louder. The metal heating under his skin, his smirk grew wider, and then without warning the restraints melted like wax dripping onto the floor. The room fell silent, except for the hiss of the machine. The scientist's voice trembled. This is impossible. The human's biology is interfering with the probe. No, Vrylock growled. This is not biology. Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm, but laced with something else. Something older than him. You should have left me alone. The air around him began to shimmer like heat rising from a fire. The markings on the walls twisted into unfamiliar shapes and the ground vibrated faintly. Soldiers raised their weapons but hesitated, unsure if they should fire, as a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The lights dimmed completely for a heartbeat, and in that brief darkness, something moved. Something that was not human when the lights returned. Ethan was still in the chair, but the restraints lay broken on the floor, and the soldiers stared wide-eyed as if they had seen the edge of something they could not understand. They dragged Ethan from the chamber down a narrow corridor that pulsed. With faint blue light, the walls seemed to hum like a living creature, and every few steps a camera followed them, as if the ship itself was watching their every move. His wrists were now locked in heavier restraints, forged from a strange black metal that absorbed the light around it. The guards marched in silence, their eyes fixed forward, but their shoulders tense as if they feared the man they escorted more than they feared the general who had given the order. The air grew colder as they entered. A vast, circular room lined with transparent tubes filled with a swirling silver fluid. Alien scientists moved between them, adjusting panels and murmuring in their native tongue. The center of the room held a massive structure like a throne of machinery. Wires as thick as a man's arm dangled from the ceiling, pulsing with green light. Ethan was shoved into the chair, his body bound by the restraints, while mechanical arms lowered from above, each tipped with a glowing needle. The lead scientist, a tall figure with pale skin, like polished stone, approached slowly. His narrow eyes locked on Ethan. "You will now give us the truth, human. Your mind holds the location of the weapon called the Black Pulse. We will take it." Ethan's lips curled in a faint smile. "You keep saying that like you think you can?" The scientist ignored the comment, gesturing to his team. The machine roared to life, a deep vibration rumbling through the floor as the needles descended and pressed against Ethan's temples. A burning sensation shot through his head. Memories flickered in his mind faster than he could focus on them. Faces, places, battles, long past. But then, like a shadow stepping into the light, something else appeared, a presence older and colder than anything in the room. It moved behind his thoughts like a predator circling prey, and wherever it passed, the alien machines faltered. The lights flickered. The silver fluid in the tubes began to ripple, as if disturbed by an unseen wind. The scientist's voice cracked. "Hold the sequence, stabilize it now." Ethan closed his eyes, the burning in his head intensifying, but he did not scream. Instead, a deep, rumbling laugh escaped his lips. A voice followed, one that was not entirely his. "You have no idea what. You are touching." The guards shifted nervously, some gripping their weapons tighter, others taking a half-step back. General Vrylock stepped into the room, his expression hard and unchanging. "Increase the power," he ordered. The scientists hesitated. "Sir, the readings are unstable. If we push further," the general cut him off. "Do it." The machine's hum deepened, the vibration growing so strong that cracks formed in the walls around them. The presence in Ethan's mind surged forward, faster than the aliens could react. Black tendrils of shadow began to seep from his skin, curling into the air and freezing the moisture around them. The temperature in the room plummeted, the silver fluid in the tubes solidifying into jagged ice shapes. The scientists stumbled back, shouting in panic, their instruments flashing warnings. Ethan opened his eyes, but they were no longer the familiar human shade. Instead, they glowed with a deep molten gold, the same hue as the general's, but brighter, more alive. The voice came again from his mouth, but carrying a tone that made the air vibrate. "You wanted secrets, but you have woken something far worse." The restraints cracked under the pressure of his hands, the black metal hissing as it split apart. The guards raised their weapons and fired, but the bolts of energy bent in the air, curling away from Ethan as if repelled by an invisible shield. One of the scientists dropped to his knees, whispering an ancient word that made the others freeze, a name from their oldest myths. The general's eyes narrowed, but even he took a cautious step back. Ethan stood slowly, the black mist swirling around his feet, stretching toward the walls where the alien symbols now burned with a crimson glow. The ship itself groaned like it was under immense strain. Alarms blared across the deck. A voice over the comms shouting, "Emergency containment breach, Sector 7. Repeat containment breach." Ethan took one step forward and the lights above exploded, showering sparks. Across the floor, his voice low and steady, yet carrying to every corner of the room you wanted to see what was inside. The floor beneath Ethan's boots vibrated like a living heartbeat. The black mist curling around his legs, twisting and pulsing with a will of its own. The alien soldiers backed away, their weapons trembling in their hands, their eyes flicking between. Him and the shattered restraints, the lead scientist's voice shook as he shouted for the emergency containment field. But before the words left his mouth, every light in the chamber died, plunging the room into complete darkness. The silence that followed was not empty. It was thick, heavy, as if the air itself had weight. And then a sound emerged, a deep, slow breath that did not belong to Ethan or any living thing in the room. The soldiers froze, sweat dripping down their necks in the darkness. The mist spread faster, reaching up the walls, wrapping around consoles, and melting them like ice under a torch. Glowing red cracks spread along the floor as if something massive pressed upward from below. A faint green emergency light flickered. On revealing Ethan still standing, his head lowered, his arms loose at his sides, but his shadow on the wall was not his own. It stretched unnaturally tall, hunched with jagged shapes protruding like the outline of wings. The alien commander-general. Vrylock stepped forward, his voice hard, but carrying the smallest trace of caution. "What are you, human?" Ethan looked up slowly, his eyes no longer golden but black, with faint streaks of light moving through them like distant stars when he spoke too. Voices echoed together, one his own and one deep enough to shake the walls. "I am not only human." Vrylock's jaw tightened. The soldiers shifted uneasily, but the general refused to step back. He signaled to activate the mind probe again, to push harder. To force whatever this was into the open, the scientists scrambled to obey, connecting the fractured machinery to backup power the moment the current hit Ethan's body. The shadow behind him began to move independently from his own limbs, stretching. Toward the soldiers, one of them fired in panic, the bolt of energy vanishing into the blackness without a sound. A sudden cold swept the chamber so sharp it burned frost, spreading over the metal floor. Vrylock barked an order to hold fire, but his voice was drowned by a low sound like a growl rumbling from everywhere. At once, the scientists screamed as the shadow detached fully from Ethan, forming into a towering beast with shifting features, its edges blurring like smoke yet solid where the claws and teeth gleamed. The mist thickened until the walls disappeared. The ceiling lost in darkness. The emergency lights flickered once, twice, then died again in the pitch black. The creature's eyes appeared two burning white voids fixed on the aliens. The deep voice spoke once more. "You searched my mind to find your weapon, but the weapon is awake." And it remembers Ethan took a step forward, the creature moving with him as though it were part of him or he part of it. The aliens tried to retreat, but the walls behind them twisted, closing like a trap, the metal bending with a slow, tortured scream. The general raised his own weapon, its barrel glowing with charged plasma, and fired. The shot passed clean through Ethan without touching, him striking the far wall, but the wall did not break. Instead, the impact rippled like water, the blackness absorbing it. The scientist closest to Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over cables. His eyes locked on the shadow's massive form, and whispered, again the same ancient word from before, as if naming it could stop it. Vrylock demanded to know what the word meant, but the scientist's only reply was a pale, terrified stare. Ethan's lips curved in a slow, cold smile, and then the mist surged. Outward, not to attack, but to push every alien in the room back against the walls, pinning them there, unable to move, their weapons clattering to the floor. He walked through the chaos untouched, his boots making no sound, the shadow creature shrinking, and folding into his body until only the human form remained. Though the air still trembled around him, he stopped at the far door, looking over his shoulder. The words quiet, but clear enough for all to hear. "This place is no prison anymore. It's Mine, and with that, the door slid open without a touch, and he stepped into the corridor beyond the sirens beginning to wail through the entire alien ship, warning every deck that the breach was no longer contained. The sirens howled through the alien vessel like a living alarm, the deep metallic wail echoing down every corridor as red lights flashed in a slow, ominous rhythm. Ethan walked calmly through the chaos, his pace steady, his face unreadable, the black mist still trailing faintly behind. Him like a shadow that refused to fade. Alien soldiers ran past in formation, their armor gleaming under the emergency lights, but none dared to block his path. Those who caught his eyes looked away as if staring too long might invite something they could not survive overhead. The ship's comms barked orders in the alien tongue, calling for full lockdown of the lower decks and immediate activation of containment squads. The air vibrated with the thrum of power surging to defensive systems. But wherever Ethan passed, lights flickered, weapons malfunctioned, and doors slid open without command. It was as if the ship itself was bending to his presence. He turned a corner and found himself in a vast hangar, the ceiling lost in shadows above. Rows of sleek alien fighters, their hulls glowing with faint blue energy, stood ready for launch. The hangar floor was alive with movement, soldiers arming themselves, engineers locking weapons into place, loading bays opening to the void beyond. At the center of it all stood a massive warship, the pride of the alien fleet, its armor black as obsidian, its cannons large enough to tear through a planet's crust. Ethan stopped at the edge of the hangar, scanning the organized chaos until his eyes found her Dr. Kasari, the alien scientist, who had tried to warn Vrylock earlier. She was arguing with two officers gesturing urgently toward Ethan's direction. One officer dismissed her with a wave, turning back to the warship, but she broke away, rushing toward Ethan, her long coat flaring behind her, her voice low but urgent. "You need to leave now. They will bring the fleet's entire firepower to stop you." Ethan tilted his head, studying her face before answering calmly. "They think they can." "Stop me!" She shook her head, her expression tense. "You don't understand. The ship you see there carries enough firepower to burn your planet to ash in hours, and Vrylock will not hesitate." Ethan's smirk returned. "Then they'll regret waking me, eh?" Sudden commotion erupted on the far side of the hangar as squads of armored soldiers entered, their heavy rifles glowing with charged plasma. The leader barked an order, and they moved to encircle Ethan, their formation tight and precise. Kasari stepped back, eyes darting between them and Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "You can't fight them all." Ethan glanced at her, his tone. "Even I won't have to." The mist thickened, swirling around his legs, and then surging outward in a single wave. The soldiers opened fire, but every bolt of energy was swallowed into the blackness like stones vanishing into deep water. Within seconds, their weapons sparked and died, leaving them staring in confusion before the mist pushed them back, pinning them against the walls just as it had in the lab. Ethan strode forward, the path clearing itself before him until he stood at the foot of the great warship, the shadow around him rising taller, stretching out like wings above his head. Kasari followed, hesitating as she stepped into the black mist, expecting it to consume her. But it parted around her as if granting passage. The ramp to the warship lowered on its own, the crew inside shouting in alarm. Ethan ascended without a word, his boots echoing. On the metal surface, the ship's lights dimming as he passed, the bridge doors slid open, revealing Vrylock standing at the center, his hands clasped behind his back, his golden eyes glowing brighter than before. "You think this ship belongs to you, human?" he said, his voice steady. Ethan stepped closer until only a few paces separated them, his eyes now glowing again with that molten gold streaked with black. "You should know by now. I'm not just human." The deck beneath them vibrated violently, consoles sparking as the mist poured into the walls and floors, the ship groaning like a beast under strain. Kasari appeared at the doorway, her eyes wide as the main view screen lit up with an incoming signal beyond the fleet. Something vast was approaching from deep space shapes, moving like shadows between the stars. The crew froze in silence as the readings came in. No one spoke until Vrylok's second officer whispered in disbelief, "It's impossible, they're not supposed to exist, Vrylok's." Gaze remained locked on Ethan. "What have you brought here?" And Ethan's answer was quiet, but heavy enough to fill the room. "You did this when you tried to take what was mine." The warship's bridge was bathed in the pale glow of the massive view screen, showing the dark void outside. But the darkness was no longer empty now. It was alive with movement. Enormous shapes sliding between the stars so large they blotted out constellations, their edges blurred as if reality itself struggled to define them. The alien crew whispered in fear, some refusing to even look directly at the screen. Dr. Kasari stepped forward, her voice tense, her hands gripping the edge of a console. "Those readings can't be right. The signal is old, older than our civilization." One of the crew glanced back at her, eyes wide, their tone shaking. "Then why is it here now?" Ethan stood at the center of the bridge, his gaze locked on the distant shapes. His expression unreadable, but the black mist around his feet writhed faster, curling like smoke caught in a storm. General Vrylok's voice broke the silence, sharp and demanding. "What are they?" The human's eyes shifted toward him, the gold in them, deepening, almost molten. And the answer came in two voices at once. "They are the architects of the Black Pulse, and they have come to collect." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, some instinctively stepping back as if the name itself carried weight. Kesari's brow furrowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've read that name only in forbidden archives. The Black Pulse was never a weapon. It was a living thing designed to erase entire civilizations." Ethan's gaze returned to the screen, his tone calm yet heavy. "They locked it away because it was too dangerous, and now it's awake." Vrylok's eyes narrowed, but his jaw was tight. "You're telling me you carry it inside you?" Ethan turned to face him fully, the shadows stretching long. "Across the bridge, I don't carry it. I am bound to it. They failed to destroy it, so they sealed it in a host and left it hidden on a backwater world. Your world found me before I found myself." Kesari's eyes widened with realization, the probe. "You used to read his mind," she said to Vrylok. "You didn't just awaken his memories. You broke the seal." The general's face hardened as if he understood, but refused to show it before he could speak. The ship trembled violently, the sensor alarms, screaming as the shapes outside shifted closer. What had been indistinct shadows now took form. Colossal beings with no fixed shape, their bodies shifting between stone and mist, each movement tearing the space around them like fragile fabric. Crew panicked, shouting for weapons to be armed and shields raised. But the moment the cannons charged, every system died. The lights flickered, the engines cut, and the hum of the ship's power faded to nothing as if swallowed. Ethan stood unaffected, his voice cutting through the chaos. "They're not here for your fleet. They're here for me, and the thing inside me." Kesari stepped toward him, desperation in her tone. "If they take you, they'll destroy everything in their path, including Earth." Ethan's gaze softened just for a second, but the mist thickened around him. "No. If they take me, they'll destroy more than you can imagine." Vrylok moved closer, his golden eyes burning with defiance. "Then fight them. Help us stop them." Ethan's faint smirk returned. "I'm not sure you want me to fight them." The deck shuddered again, the massive beings now filling the entire view screen. Their eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed with the same deep gold streaked with black that swirled in Ethan's. The connection was unmistakable. Kasari turned from the sight, her voice trembling. "We can't outrun them. We can't even touch them." Vrylok's expression hardened. "We have one choice. We use him." The general's hand hovered over the ship's command panel. But Ethan spoke before he could act, his voice low. "You think you can control me just like you tried in your lab. But this time you won't be the one giving orders." The mist surged outward, pouring through the walls of the ship wrapping. around consoles and crew alike without harming them, but making clear that every part of the vessel was now under his will. The bridge doors slammed shut, locking tight. Ethan turned back to the view screen, the titanic forms now drifting closer, their sheer size dwarfing even the largest alien dreadnoughts. The gold in his eyes burned brighter as he whispered almost to himself, "You wanted a weapon. Now you'll see what it looks like when it chooses its own target." The warship floated in the silent void as the colossal shadow beings closed in their sheer presence, making the stars themselves seem dimmer. Every alien on the bridge stood frozen, their breathing shallow, as if afraid even the sound might draw the attention of what waited outside. The deep gold light in Ethan's eyes blazed brighter. The black mist around him no longer curling lazily, but whipping in sharp, restless motions, as if eager for what was coming. The largest of the beings drifted forward, its form constantly shifting. From jagged, mountain-like shapes to smooth, serpentine coils, every movement bending the surrounding space into unnatural curves, its eyes or the burning voids that served as eyes locked directly onto Ethan, and the air in the bridge grew heavy. So heavy, the crew felt it in their chests. Dr. Kasari gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles pale, her voice barely a whisper. "They're speaking to him, aren't they?" Ethan didn't look at her, but the answer came in a tone that wasn't entirely his. "They're not speaking. They're remembering the last time they saw me." General Vrylock stepped forward, his golden gaze sharp and unblinking. "What do they want from you?" Ethan's mouth curved into a faint, humorless smile. "They want me back, but they'll take your galaxy with me." The deck trembled again this time from within the ship, as systems that had been dead moments before roared to life not under the crew's control, but under Ethan's screens lit with alien runes. The mist spread. Through every wall, conduit and console connecting him to the warship, like veins to a heart. Kasari's voice cracked. "Ethan, you have to stop this. If you unleash them, nothing will survive." He finally turned toward her, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. "They already know where we are. The only question is who walks away when this is over." The largest of the shadow beings moved even closer until it filled the entire view, its surface shifting like an ocean in a storm, without warning. The black mist inside the bridge surged upward, forming towering shapes behind Ethan. The shadow beast from before now fully formed its clawed hands, curling as if tasting the air. For fear the crew stumbled back, weapons useless against the suffocating presence. The gold in Ethan's eyes deepened to molten fire, and the voice that came from him was thunder in a confined space. "This ends now." The mist exploded outward through the hull into the void, wrapping around the shadow beings in vast coils. Stretching for miles outside space itself, rippled under the force, the beings responded with movement so fast they blurred, striking against the mist with force enough to send shockwaves through the warship. The crew clung to consoles as the deck tilted, alarms shrieking. Kasari forced herself to the view screen, her eyes wide at the sight. Outside, the warship was surrounded on all sides, the mist and the beings locked in a silent war of scale too vast to comprehend arcs of light and shadow. Tearing holes in the star field, every strike echoing like distant thunder. Ethan stood in the center of it all, unmoving, his mind somewhere far beyond the bridge. Each time a shadow being struck, he countered through the mist each time they pushed forward. He pushed back, until at last one of the smaller beings collapsed into fragments, dissolving into the void. Vrylock's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can kill them." Ethan's gaze snapped back to him briefly. "No, I can unmake them, the remaining." Beings roared not in sound, but in a vibration that rattled the bones of everyone aboard. They struck together, the largest driving forward with all its mass slamming into the mist, in a collision that sent a wave of darkness flooding over the warship. Kesari stumbled, falling to the floor, her vision swimming the air thin as the light dimmed to nothing, and then silence. When her vision cleared, Ethan still stood, his eyes fading slowly back to human. The vast shapes outside were gone, nothing but empty space and distant stars. The bridge was dead silent, the crew staring at him with a mix of awe and terror. Ethan's voice was quiet, but carried through the stillness. They won't come back for a long time. But when they do, it will be for all. Of you, Vrylock straightened his stance, his face unreadable, and what will you do until then? Ethan turned toward the doors, which slid open without a touch as the mist drew back into his body. I'll be ready, and as he stepped out of the bridge, the gold light in his eyes flared one last time, and the deep alien voice whispered not to them, but to something far beyond. One secret leads to another, and this galaxy has so many to take.